Nick Halla from Impossible Foods, the company that is on a mission to make our global food system truly sustainable by developing a new generation of meats and cheeses made entirely from plants. And do remember, slide out. Thank you.
I'm Nick Halla, I'm the SVP of International, and I'll tell you a little bit more today about Impossible, what our mission is, why we're doing this, and then where we are today. So we'll start out with our mission. Our mission is to restore the biodiversity of Earth, reduce the impact of climate change, and create a much more sustainable food system. And the way we're going to do that, and the way we are doing that, is creating the most delicious meat, fish, and dairy foods the world's ever experienced, but all directly from plants. And I'll tell you a little bit more why. So before this, who's heard of Impossible Foods? I can't really see too much. All right, so good number. We're not in Europe yet, but it'll be a very important market for us, and we'll talk more about that too. So where did this all start? So in 2009, this is our founder, Dr. Patrick Brown. He spent 25 years in medical research studying cancer, genomics, medical diagnostics. Had never done anything in food before, but he took a sabbatical in 2009 to look at how he could have the biggest impact on the world with the rest of his career. And he quickly realized by far the biggest threat we have to the global environment is our reliance on animals for food. Animals are great at producing foods that people love, but they're extremely inefficient and definitely not scalable to the way that we use them today, and they're causing massive destruction globally. So he found that out in sabbatical, looked at going into academia, his world, and doing research, but decided it'd be too slow. Talked to the big food companies, but that's not really the way they think, and so decided that the only way to do this is start a company. And that's where I met him. My background is the food industry, so I grew up on a beef and dairy farm in the Midwest of the US. I worked at General Mills, a big food company, for 4 years, designing manufacturing systems and new products as an engineer. And my whole time in the food industry, I'd never heard a thing about this. And it was completely new. So I met him as he had the idea, as he was starting the company, and I joined to be his early business partner. And what we realized is, and what I heard from him, which as a small farmer in the Midwest of the US, these types of statistics were never talked about. So 50% of the arable land surface each year is used for animal agriculture, about 30% of the fresh water, 15 to 18% of the greenhouse gas emissions, and one of the most irreversible ones is the biodiversity loss. So in the last 45 years, the amount of biodiversity on Earth, the number of wild mammals, fish, birds, has decreased by 58% now. And that's almost all driven by animal agriculture. And what Pat realizes, this is a huge issue, but it's also a huge opportunity. We look at what animals are good at doing, and they're great at creating products that people love, but they're actually extremely inefficient, which creates an opportunity. So if you take a beef cow in the US, which is likely the most efficient, because it's the most concentrated and optimized beef production system, the beef cow has a 3% efficient technology of taking plant-based proteins and nutrients and converting them into meat. So for every 33 grams of protein you put into a cow, we consume 1 out as meat. So if we go directly to the plant-based source, we can be 10, 20, 30 times more efficient and use a lot less land in what we're doing. So the market itself is massive. And this is another reason why you had to start a company to really address this. The animal agriculture industry is a $1.7 trillion industry today, projected to be $3 trillion by 2035. It's growing very quickly, especially as incomes rise and the population continues to rise. People demand more meat. But the good thing is that consumers are starting to change. Consumers are looking for this, and this has really accelerated over the last 4 years. So the vast majority of our consumers are meat eaters. And the way we've done that is we have to hit taste. So who's had a veggie burger before? Let's keep your hand up if you're meat eaters or have had meat before. Who prefers a veggie burger, typical veggie burger, over meat? 1, 2 hands, 3 maybe? So very few. And that's what we realized. And one of the first things I did when we were starting the company is I went and tried all this stuff. And as a person growing up in a beef and dairy farm, I couldn't believe people ate this stuff. But that wasn't what I was looking for, and the products were made for people that had already made that choice. And so they were looking for something different. In order for us to change the system, we have to produce products that meat consumers, the hardcore meat lovers of the world, actually prefer over what they get today from cows. And that's the only way this can change. So how did we do this? So in 2011, we started the company. Pat's background is all fundamental science. And so out of the first 50 employees we hired over the first 2 years, almost no one came from the food industry. It was all molecular biology, biochemistry, material science, and really fundamental research to understand, what actually makes meat, fish, and dairy foods so absolutely delicious. Then we would go in the plant-based world and build new tools, better tools, for how we can replace that system and beat that system. And so an example of what we learned is we started breaking down meat flavor, all the aromas and flavors, and we learned it's extremely complex. And so if you put a burger or a steak or a piece of chicken on the grill, there's hundreds and hundreds of compounds that are all created as you cook. And so if we wanted to replace those one by one to get the same flavor profile, it'd be extremely complex, costly, and certainly not scalable. But as a team dug deeper, we learned there's one protein in meats, a protein called heme, that drives all the flavor chemistry as you cook. So now we have a way to do this. And you can think about heme as this. So the main protein in your blood is hemoglobin. It takes oxygen from your lungs to your muscles and your organs. In muscle, it's a protein called myoglobin. And that myoglobin is a heme protein. That heme is identical to whether it's in hemoglobin, myoglobin, or plants, because all cells have heme proteins. And that heme, as it cooks, reacts with amino acids, simple sugars, other nutrients to just create this flavor explosion that is the richness and the diverseness of meat. So now we actually have a really, really simple way to replicate that experience that we know meat consumers are looking for. And so we harvested it from plants for the first couple years. You can find it if you take the root systems of a legume or a soybean as an example, there's pieces on it that are blood red because the heme concentration is so high. But it was very hard to scale that, and so we actually developed a yeast fermentation process similar to how Ren is made, and Ryan was up here earlier talking about this. So very similar types of technologies, and creating a scalable way to do this. And this is our first product, our ground beef, which we'll talk about. But this applies to everything, whether it's pork, chicken, fish, beef. Heme drives the flavor chemistry of really all the components of meat, and many other products too. So now we have a way to really create the whole meat platform. So the first 2 years of the company, we spent really developing this platform, learning, building the tools that we need to be able to understand and try to beat, meat from an animal. About 2 years in, we decided that ground beef would be our first target. So why do you think ground beef would be a good target for us? What was that? Texture. Yep. It's a great sensory profile. People love it. It's good taste, good chew. What else? Anything? Yeah.
Worst climate impact by far?
Huge reason. Beef is one of the most inefficient system, so the impact on the climate of the beef system is massive. It's a technical challenge. It's an iconic product in pretty much every country and every cuisine. There are iconic dishes that are made from there, so we can really drive the cultural movement. So we started, and in 2016, we launched the Impossible Burger. So this is meat made from plants, meat that can actually perform on par, and as we continue to get better than anything you can do from an animal. And I'll tell you a little bit more about what this is and what's in it. So when we first started doing prototyping in 2013, first ones were not good. We won't put the description out there of how the sensory panels actually described them. But within months, you could see how it was working. And within a year, we could put meat from a cow, meat from Impossible, blind to consumers and to meat consumers. And they would actually say they both come from an animal, but they preferred meat. Now when we do this is some of our most recent data. And so this is the preference just in blind taste tests, just based on taste, not knowing it's from plants and some of the other benefits you get. We're essentially on par with meat from a cow. So we've caught up to the cow. And this is 2013, so 5-6 years we've been able to do that. And we're only starting. We're just starting. And this graph in 5 years is going to be completely different as we learn what consumers like, as we can learn how we can make better flavors, better textures. And that's a big power of the platform. So back to our sustainability mission and your reason for why we start with ground beef. And so for us, a couple years ago, Pat got asked, he's like, well, are you a technology company? Are you a food company? And he had a great answer. He's like, the truth is both. We're a technology company and a food company. But at the end of the day, we're a planet company because it all comes back down to what we're doing. The only reason Impossible Foods exists is to make the planet a much more sustainable place. And so for the Impossible Burger, we use 96% less land, 87% less water, and 89% less greenhouse gas emissions. So every time a consumer chooses Impossible over meat from a cow, it's a real impact. And that really resonates with our consumers. So what's in it? So obviously people always wonder about nutrition, and one of the core principles of the company is we won't put a product on the market that scientifically is not more nutritious and healthier than what we're replacing. Now, beef is not a hard target. If you look at this, we're 240 calories versus 290, 14 grams of protein versus 23 for 80-20, less saturated fat, same amount of protein. We can put all the B vitamins and minerals and nutrients in that you want to get from meat while leaving things out like cholesterol, hormones, and antibiotics. And then heme is the iron source, which is the most bioavailable source of iron in the human diet. And so our team does a lot of work, optimizing the nutrition of the product as we continue to scale too. And this is getting better and better. This is our version 2 product that we launched in January, which is significantly better in taste, performance, and nutrition. And we'll continue to evolve that. So when we started going to market, we spent more than 5 years as a company building a platform and building the team before we took the product to the market. And since the reaction that we got when we were talking about who's had a veggie burger before, we knew we had an uphill battle. So we went to a grocery store, they'd put you in the vegan ghetto in the corner, and you have to try to drive people there, but you're not gonna hit the meat consumers or who the consumers that we have to hit. And so we decided we were gonna go to the market differently. And so we launched in one restaurant in New York City with David Chang in July 2016. We went to 3 restaurants by end of the year, built up to about 30 by mid next year, and everyone was handpicked, and I'll tell you some stories behind that. Hit about 400 after that year, 4,000 after last year, and now we're over 17,000. And so it's been growing very quickly. And I'll walk you through why. So, we started with the meat chefs of America, David Chang. He was known for 2 years before he launched with us, he had said he'll never serve a vegetarian product on his menu, because that's not what his consumers want. So PETA picketed him. We're like, he's perfect for us. And so then we launched with him, and we had lines around the blocks for months for his restaurant. Because it's like him as a meat chef putting his credibility behind a product like Impossible says something. Chris Cosentino, the meat chef of the Midwest, Tracy Desjardins in San Francisco, Michael Simon, like all these chefs have a massive influence on meat culture. Then we went to the better burger chains, more the premium gourmet burgers, Umami Burger, Hop Dottie, main burger chain of Texas. And you started building the market that way. And now we've hit anything from that to Burger King and White Castle. Because in order to really have an impact on the food system, you have to hit really where every consumer has. And we'll hit some consumer stuff after this. And then it's not just the restaurateurs that support us. We have many supporters like Questlove and Katy Perry who want to put their brand and their image behind Impossible. So as we did that, we spent more than 3 years in the market before we ever launched a product in retail, which is pretty unheard for a branded food product. And we launched in September to probably more pent-up demand for the product than any food product ever has been when we launched in retail. So we launched in 27 stores in a chain called Gelson's Market in Los Angeles. And for the first 10 days, we outsold the entire ground beef category with one product. And it still continues to sell very well. We went to Wegmans, like cultural icon in the Northeast, a family-run organization, one of the premier grocers in America, still is selling extremely well. And then we're going to continue to expand this now. And the consumer reaction on the other side is, one thing that we've learned, kind of behind that plant-based anxiety that you don't think is going to taste good, is that tasting is believing. Like our purchase intent after people taste it, after you cook with it and you experience that magic of cooking, completely changes your perception of what plants can do. And that's what we have to do, and that's how we have to drive the movement. But we're not just a US-based company. So in 2018 in April, we expanded internationally. And we started in Asia. So why do you think we started in Asia instead of here in Europe? Big reason. So right now, meat consumption globally, Asia consumes 44% of the global meat consumption. And it's growing quite quickly. There's a lot of food safety, food security challenges there. So for us, for our mission, it was extremely important to get started early. And Horizons Ventures has been a huge partner for us in that effort. And so we launched in Hong Kong in 2018, launched Singapore this year, and this year our business has been up more than 6x since the start of the year. We're now in more than 500 restaurants between just Hong Kong and Singapore. And the way we've done it is, we don't deliver a burger. We give our chefs a block of Impossible meat, and they can make whatever they want out of it. And so the chefs can localize the cuisine and the product for the local culture. And it's been extremely impactful for us to say, we're not bringing our culture and forcing it on you. We're letting you create your own. And it's worked very well. And so it set us up to expand much faster now internationally as we continue to scale. And so for our consumers, I mean, it's important for us to hit everybody. If you look at this, we do lens more on the young side, as the younger populations are more keen to look for more sustainable foods, and they're actually the influencers that we've been targeting who help change their parents' opinions on food as well. Income across the board, which is extremely important for us as we scale, and 95% of our consumers are meat eaters, which is our core target, and that sets us up really well as we go into retail and continue expanding the market. So if you look at some of the consumer data, this is Yelp reviews of Impossible in 2016 when we launched. You can see New York City, San Francisco, LA, I think were the only places we actually had restaurants at this point. So you can see those little dots, and then 2018, 2 years later, it's all over the place. Anywhere from the major cities to my small town, farm town of like 15,000 people has a restaurant that carries it, and they say it's the most popular item on the menu in rural America. So I was like, and they had no idea that I actually came from that town. They just loved it. And they also said it's probably the only reason they're still in business. But the restaurant world is very hard. It's very hard. And even we're the #1 late night trend on Yelp. And so it's like if it was a health food, then you wouldn't eat it late at night. It's like people do it because it tastes good and it's craveable. So we talked a little bit about this, whether you're restaurateurs or celebrities. Massive support for Impossible. It's a brand that's doing good for the world, and people want to associate with it. So Ellen talked about it on her show for a few minutes with Chrissy Teigen. Katy Perry wore an Impossible burger to the Met Gala, and this is all just on their own. And it's amazing to see the support that we've had. It really helps drive that consumer movement. And we're really at a tipping point. If we went back 4 years ago, in 2015, we went to the Climate Change Summit in Paris. And as a food company, everybody asked, like, why are you here? It's like, you're not energy or transportation. Right? This is one of the biggest, or from an environmental standpoint overall, the biggest issue that we have. And now it's completely changed. And so I think a lot of things are driving this, the awareness behind it. The products are getting to the point where meat consumers and mainstream consumers are actually enjoying the products versus having to eat a veggie burger. And it's just getting started, but we're at a tipping point that's really starting to change the industry. And you're seeing all kinds of companies jump in, which is great. So as we scale, one of the hard things about a physical goods business is that you have to scale production and infrastructure. So we have a facility in Oakland that we've scaled to millions of pounds of product a month. And we just did a partnership we announced this summer with a group called OSI Group. And they have 65 manufacturing facilities globally, and all really meat facilities. And they've been a great partner. We have a facility already running and another one in the works. And so it enables us to scale much more effectively than if we did it all on our own. And we'll be building partners globally to do this. So to wrap it up, I have to highlight our R&D team. They've been the backbone of what it makes Impossible what we are. The platform itself is made to do anything that we do for meat and more. And so we have prototypes across the board of many products, other types of meats, dairy, fish, really anything. And as right now we're scaling the ground beef product because it's such a massive impact. But over the next coming years, we'll definitely be launching a lot more stuff and making our product better and better. And for Where International, we started in Hong Kong, Macau, Singapore. Asia's a big focus. We're starting to put more work over here in Europe too. Retail, this is where consumers really get to experience the magic of Impossible as you take it home and cook, and then the new products behind it. So, thank you. All right.
Please welcome to the stage moderator of this fireside chat, Helene Frihammer, National Coordinator of Climate Partners and Sustainability Commentator in the Norwegian news channel TV2. Please.
Maybe.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Is it on? Well, lovely to meet you, Nick Halla. I was waiting to tell that terrible joke. Sorry about that one. Should we sit?
Yes, sounds good.
Well, what I wanted to start off with is basically last year, this time of the year, right before Halloween, we were in Santa Cruz, and we had two of the harshest food critics in the world with us, having a meal down by the sea lions with all the noise and everything, and had 4 lovely burgers, and they were juicy and lovely. And of course, the 2 harshest critics in the world are my daughters, 9 and 7, and they absolutely adored Impossible Burger.
Awesome.
Yeah. So my first question to you is basically, How do you find your own burgers? Do you like them at all? Do you agree with my daughters?
I do. I don't really take my opinion for much, though. My meat consumption in general has decreased a lot over time as I learn about the environmental impacts of the system, the health effects of the system. So it's like, for me, it's like going to my hometown and having my nieces and nephews and my grandparents eating and say, hey, I actually really enjoy this. So I was back for my grandma's 90th birthday 2 weeks ago in Minnesota. And, she's had many Impossible Burgers, and she's like, I mean, if you can convince that group, you can convince everybody. I think.
Exactly.
And she's like, yeah, it tastes good. I'd eat it.
So do you still eat meat yourself, or have you stopped?
Very little. I think there's a lot of cultural places where it's really hard not to, but very little. So I don't cook with meat anymore, where I used to cook meat every day, literally every day.
So you explained a little bit about the success factors, but what do you think is the key success factor to Impossible Foods now moving along so quickly and becoming really renowned and attracting investors?
I think there's a fundamental part of Impossible that I think it just makes us very different. And that's just based on the science and the technology that we've built. So for us, it's like we have to create products that meat consumers, dairy consumers, everybody loves better than what they get from meat. So that just mentality, I think, drives everything. So it drives a different approach on innovation and creation versus what we would do at like a General Mills. And that enables us to create products that no one else can create. Then you can put the marketing and the excitement and sales behind it. Now, I think another piece is, we do lean into it. And so this is a huge issue. We're not going to back away. It might not be the funnest issue for people to kind of realize, but we're going to create a brand that invites consumers in and says, this is just delicious food, while telling the world the story of like why this has to happen.
So what is your main competitor in this market?
So the biggest competitor would be the beef industry in this product. So Tyson's, Cargill's, JBS, because for us, it's like that's the market that we have to hit. And then everybody who's really working to make the food system more sustainable is a friend, because this is a $1.7 trillion industry.
So basically, Beyond Burgers is a friend.
In a lot of ways, that's right. Yeah, I mean, and you could say like Ryan, what they're doing for Perfect Day too. This is great. This is what we have to have happen. We need more innovations. You think about the diversity of products that we get from animals. It's not one company that's going to do everything. We need everybody working on this and changing the infrastructure.
So you're basically on the same mission.
We are. Yep, quite similar.
So what about your personal motivation? What drove you to go into this area, and why did you choose exactly this line of work to make your impact?
So great question. So my entire life I've been trying to get out of the food industry, and I clearly have not succeeded. But I grew up on a dairy farm, realized pretty young that was not the life for me. It's a really hard way to make a living. You work 365 days of the year. It's tough. I learned a lot of the things I think that made me who I am, which are huge. I wouldn't give that up for anything, but it definitely was not a life I wanted to run. And then, so I studied engineering. We did a lot in renewable energy then too. And I think just being connected to the land all day, every day as on a farm just made me really in touch from a sustainability mind. And so I knew I wanted to do something sustainably impactful, but as like a small town farm kid, I have no idea what that meant. And so like at University of Minnesota where I studied, it'd be like Dow and Exxon and BP. And I was like, oh, what are you doing? Like sustainable technologies in the openings? Like, oh yeah, we have a group, but yeah, there's nothing open. And I was like, yeah, because you're full of crap. But it was like, I knew I wanted to do something differently. I ended up working at General Mills because it was a frontline research job. So you can be in the action of making something and making something for people that you can see consume, that you can see them consume. But at the end of the day, I was making a fruit roll that I could print your picture on, or like a biscuit, and you can make take the cost down 10%. But it's like, what am I really doing? So I went out to grad school to focus 100% on renewable energy. That's where science and technology could come in and have global, impactful changes on climate change and environment. And so I did nothing in food at all until I met Pat. And when I met him, I just thought about this and I was like, yeah, I guess that makes sense. We started going through the numbers. No one was working on it. No one was talking about it 8 years ago. And I was like, yeah, this is something that I can totally get behind. I called my brother, who was like diehard meat, like animal farmer. That's all he wants to do. And it's like, what do you think of this? He's like, this is great. Because like the way we grew up, the lifestyle that we have doesn't really exist anymore. As a small family farmer, you can't make money. It's cutthroat. It's scaled to the point where everything's breaking. He's like, in some ways, this is like us fighting back. I was like, oh, I kind of like that. So it fit very well.
That's an excellent thought. You said something about it, but what do you think is the biggest potential of reducing climate gas emissions in this field? how would you go about it? I see you target the American market and the Chinese market. Is that the way you want to work in the future as well?
Yeah, I think to reduce the impact of animal agriculture, you have to target the biggest markets and get the biggest players moving. And so the U.S. is a great starting point. It's where the world looks for innovation and changes. And then, China is where it's about 28% of the global meat consumption is just in China itself. So Asia is 44%, but the most of that is actually within China. And it's a very hard place to figure out how to do this, but the need is there. And so it's a key focus. And if you look at it from an animal standpoint, beef is the most inefficient, so it's about 3% efficient. Then pork is a bit more efficient. Poultry is even a bit more efficient because essentially the shorter the lifespan, the less calories they burn, the less you need to put into an animal before what you get out. And so start at beef, where it's by far the biggest impact. Then you can go down to the other categories.
True. Well, here in Norway, we have quite a big oil lobby because, of course, we have oil and gas that we live off. But how is it with the meat lobby, I guess, in the US and maybe also in China? I'm not sure.
Well, I think the way,
do you get affected by them at all? Do they target you?
For us, the way we always position this is we have to succeed as a company just based on our merits, period. No, it's like when I was working in renewable energy, whether it's wind or solar or other parts of the industry, a lot of them are kind of piped up by subsidies, which are as risky as a business standpoint. Then it also puts other risks from a competitive standpoint behind it too. And for us, it's like we have to create a brand, we have to create products that can stand on their own completely through any attack. So any regulation, any attack, and as long as we have freedom to operate, we're good to, we can succeed. And we've always built a company on that fundamental philosophy. From the industry, are they worried about it? Surely. I mean, this is a big change. It's good to see companies like, Tyson is launching their own plant-based lines. So they're getting into it. We'll see what they actually do.
Are they looking to invest?
They have invested in some. Yeah.
Okay, let's have a look at some of the questions from the audience here. When are you coming to Norway?
Great question. So we don't have any plans to announce on exactly when we're coming to Norway or really throughout Europe. We launched our first product 3 years ago and just started it in Asia and just launched retail. So we're moving quite quickly. Norway and broader Europe is going to be a critical market for us. But yeah, we don't have any timelines to announce.
What a shame.
Yeah.
My daughters will be annoyed. So what about how much money has the Impossible Food raised and how many employees do you have as of date?
Yeah, we've had the luxury of having amazing investors, and I think it starts with the mission and the vision that Pat had from the start is this vision is to change a global system, and it's a $1.7 trillion industry and growing. And so creating a technology that can do that has piqued the interest of investors. So we have anywhere from Coastal Ventures was our initial investor, Bill Gates, Horizons Ventures came in quite early and has been an amazing supporter. Temasek, a Singaporean sovereign wealth fund. So it really kind of spans the board. And to now we've raised more than $750 million to put into this platform and expansion. And we'll continue to take that from there. And as the business succeeds, it opens up more opportunities and we'll invest in growth. And then as a company, we're a bit over 500 employees now.
What about the cost of the actual product? How is that in competition-wise towards regular beef?
Yeah, and I mean some of the stats I showed up there for where consumers are is we're hitting all income brackets for consumers, and that's because we can be at Momofuku Nishi where you probably have a $15 to $20 burger, to White Castle which sells Impossible for $1.99.
Exactly.
And so it's really important for us to hit both of those markets. And meat is something that can be super premium, but also can hit mass, and we have to hit both.
Sure. Yeah. Okay, I think we're going to wrap up with one final question. How do you see the future of Impossible Foods and the meatless market? What direction are you going to go in? Is this going to go well?
I think it's going to go very well. I think the biggest risk is it doesn't go fast enough. So if you look at the impact behind this and the projections on global growth, the United Nations projects that meat consumption will increase 70% by 2050. It just doesn't work. No. And so this has to move extremely fast for us to be able to have a sustainable world. And I mean, it is just getting started. Like 3-4 years ago when we'd do a brand tracker and say, why are you choosing your meats and your foods? Sustainability and environment was at the bottom. Now it's typically third or fourth. And so consumers are there, and that's just starting. So you see more and more companies coming in, whether it be infrastructure plays on ingredients, to products, to new innovations, and it has barely gotten started. It's exciting.
It's really exciting. And especially for me being also a leader of a climate network here in Norway, I'm hoping that we can get those mindsets to come into play also on the meat industry and on meat products. So
Sounds
hopefully we'll hear more of that and also get your Impossible products here to Norway.
Sounds good.
Thank you so much for the conversation.
Thank you.